Sometime in the 90s, probably around the time everybody was crazy about the craft, my sister and her best friend decided to make a Ouija board and contact a spirit. We know what they are in the UK, and no doubt, these days, you can even buy one off of Etsy, and supposedly in the US, Walmart. But they're considered toys, and if you wanted one back in the day, you just made one. All you really need is a piece of paper with all the letters drawn on them, and yes and no boxes. They didn't even have a planchet back then. They just put an upside-down glass on the paper and began. There was a lot of giggling, because they thought it was a hoax. I was allowed to watch but not join in, as apparently I was too young. They asked what most teenage girls would ask. The glass was swaying around, and conveniently spelled out the names of both the boys they had a crush on when asked who they would get the next disco with. Boring and very obvious they were moving it. Until something a bit different happened. Once they exhausted all the boy and juicy gossip stuff, my sister's friend asked what she would be after school. Everybody knew she wanted to be a hairdresser. In fact, at the time, she was literally obsessed. But instead of her, my sister spelling it out, the glass seemed to move faster and spelt out D-E-A-D. What would she be after school? Dead. Both of them screamed, throwing their hands off the glass. Her friends started crying. They accused each other of playing a nasty trick. But they both were good, and I couldn't imagine either of them pulling something like that. Then, the glass, which had been a perfectly normal tumbler glass taken from the kitchen that had been used for many times, just shattered instantly, with nobody around. We all screamed, and my sister was brave enough to reach over and rip up the Ouija board into tiny pieces. Our mother came in, and we all got a right telling off, and a stern lesson in to not mess with things you don't know about. Mom was more concerned that one of us could have gotten cut from the glass. I think she still thought that one of us had broken it on purpose, for some sort of overly dramatic effect. But we had not. None of us had been anywhere near it. And it wasn't just a crash. It literally broke into pieces by itself. It is safe to say that none of us have ever messed with anything like that again, or have witnessed any glasses exploding since. When I was in college, I had this roommate. We'll call her Alice. She was a really goody-goody two-shoe type person. You know, didn't go to parties, studied all the time, was morbidly obsessed with her grades more than her social life. In fact, I can't even recall her ever bringing a guy back. But she didn't preach at me and always obeyed the sock on the door rule, so we got along fine. In fact, we were actually pretty close, and before test, it really paid off. As one night, I had a pre-law test the next day. Instead of finding a party somewhere, I found myself in the room with Alice, studying and reading my book. She was hoping to go to med school, so we both sat there in silence for a few hours, just the click of our pens and turning our pages to be heard. All of a sudden, she gets up, reaches under her bed, and pulls out a Ouija board. I'm telling you, I don't think I've ever been more surprised in my life. We never really had discussed religion, but I guess I presumed because she abstained from anything fun, that she must be maybe Catholic or something. And now here she was, with her very own spirit board. I just sat watching as she got it out, put her fingers on the planchet, and cool as ice, asked if she would pass her biology test tomorrow. The damn thing shot across to yes. She was about to pack it away, when I somehow managed to pull myself out of my initial shock, asking her, "Can I have a go?" In her defense, She looked like it was the last thing she wanted. She said she wasn't sure, that nobody else had ever used it. I'm a pro at wearing people down, and before long, the board was on my bed, and my fingers on the planchet. I didn't believe for a second it would really move. So I asked, will I hook up with this guy this weekend? Come on, I wasn't wasting my question on a test when there was a possibility of getting with a hot football player. I'll never forget what happened next. The board flew out of my hand and smashed against the far wall, and then I was thrown against the wall by my bed and literally pinned there before suddenly dropping. It felt like somebody had me around the throat, and for those few seconds, I felt like I struggled to breathe. I was terrified, but there's no way in the world I could have willed myself or faked that. Alice too was terrified, and after that, she quickly got rid of the board. We never spoke about it again. The rest of my time together with her in college was much more benign. In fact, that little event caused me to stay away from partying and anything crazy. But I guess I can attribute that to my success afterwards, since I really started to pull away from that lifestyle and really work hard towards my grades in school. I guess I had some sort of crazy fear that if I went off partying, that demon, whatever the hell it was, would get me. I don't know, it sounds weird, but I can't describe the feeling. Anyway, that's my Ouija board story. My aunt had bought my little sister a Ouija board for Christmas one year. That'll probably tell you a few things about her. She didn't quite share the religious convictions that our parents did. I don't know if it was because she did really think her own thing, or she thought they were interesting, or possibly the fact that she, on her own, practiced witchcraft. It wasn't your typical cheap glow-in-the-dark or spooky Ouija board either. The thing was all kind of funky looking, pastel colors, art that looked like rainbows, and candy, reminiscent of Lisa Frank in the 90s. It was clearly designed to appeal to little girls. I didn't even know if my little sister understood what a Ouija board was. My little sister wouldn't let the board out of her sight, and Mom made no move to confront her over it. Perhaps she resigned her idea that as long as my little sister never actually used it, or used in the way it was designed, then maybe she wouldn't have anything to worry about. At the time, my little sis was only 6, so I tried to some smoke and mirrors that day when she wanted me to show her how to play the game. I brushed off her request several times in a row, saying that I would do it later, hoping she would forget. But she never did, and eventually got upset that I keep putting it off. At the time, I didn't share the same superstitions about Ouija boards with my mom. All I knew was that there were some pretty scary stories attached to them, and that you just never knew what you were in for when you sat down with one. And I won't lie, I was curious. I always had been. So, the more she asked, the more I grew, curiously. She finally talked me into promising to show her how to use the board after Mom and Dad went to bed. Now, it wasn't like a typical ritual scene. There were no candles, there were no speaking of spells. We just simply used her nightlight, which was close enough. Even in the dim light of that, I was starting to get shivers before I'd even done anything. I was lulled into a false sense of security because my sister couldn't focus to save herself. She was so taken with the idea of us putting our hands on the planchet and sliding it around. I never quite had the opportunity to ask any spirits any real questions. She just pushed the planchet around, aimlessly. It made me feel better to think that I couldn't get her to take the board seriously enough to really do anything legitimate. But that's what I thought at the time. After several nights of silly sessions with the board, we had one night where she was dead serious about using the board as it was designed, and my heart sank. A personality came to the board that identified itself as NADA, or nada. I asked if it meant Nadia, but it confirmed with NADA, the actual Spanish word for nothing. I got the overwhelming feeling that I was messing with something that I shouldn't be. So, at the time, I hastily told the spirit goodbye, ending the session. Despite my sister's protests, I told her we would be taking a break from the game for a while. And while she didn't agree with me, she instead began messing with the board by herself. That at the time made me very uneasy, but there was nothing I could do. She loved it. Things only began to go downhill from there. For a week straight, my sister would not shut up about how much Nada liked me. Nada this, nada that. One night, I got out of the shower and nearly went through the ceiling because my sister was standing on the other side of the curtain. She told me that Nada liked it when I was showering. She wore a look that I couldn't believe what I was seeing. A smirk, a leer. It was a look that a child should never have in their eyes when looking at another human being. In denial, I remember writing it off as paranoia. I began having half-remembered dreams of lying in my bed and feeling like there was a bowling ball that had been baking in the sun rolling around on top of me. The hot weight would roll in uncomfortable trails on my chest and down my stomach, in circles around my groin. Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of it, and naturally, there was nothing there in the room with me. The last time I heard that strange dream, I woke up, and it was everything I could do to keep from screaming, because my little sister was standing right next to the side of the bed, staring at me. Not looking right at all. Her nightie drenched in sweat. Her hair was flat, and her cheeks all flushed. I asked her what she was doing, and she told me that Nada had promised her good things if she would stand there and watch what I was doing. I freaked out. That was more than I could take. I acted. I went into my sister's room, got the board, took it outside, and burned it, right then and there, no questions asked. My sister was exactly where I had left her by my bedside. She looked like a flat tire, but she looked like herself again. She was going to be out of it for weeks before the spark of her identity would come back. Then, that feeling would come back for me to stay for years to come, gradually fading away. If this story bothers you, well, it should, because it bothered me and my sister for a long time afterwards. I think she has kind of forgotten about it, or so I hope, but it stands out in my mind much more vividly. And I know one thing: I will never go around a spirit board ever again. Nothing good comes from it,